Hi folks, welcome to RJ Impact. As well as civil private cases that are running through the courts at the moment against Sam Bankman-Fried, there are 3 government-issued indictments, 2 civil and 1 criminal. I'm going to do a shortish video on each one so that you have the whole picture as to what Sam Bankman-Fried is currently facing. So this will be a 3-part series and I'll run through each indictment in each one. Before I get into the substance of this indictment, if you didn't know already, Sam Bankman-Fried set up his own companies in the crypto world. Firstly Alameda, which traded, and secondly FTX, which acted as a crypto exchange. By his late 20s, SBF was worth over $30 billion. However, in late 2022, his whole empire collapsed and allegations of massive frauds and mismanagement were uncovered, leaving what is currently understood to be an $8 billion black hole and over 1 million FTX users wondering if they've lost all their money. Let's get to it. So here we have it, the now unsealed indictment against Sam Bankman-Fried, brought by none other than the United States of America, and in particular the Southern District of New York. There are 8 counts in total, and counts 1 to 7 relate to the management or mismanagement of money or assets in one way or another in connection with FTX and Alameda. The 8th count, which I'll cover later, took me a little bit by surprise when I read it, and you'll have to wait until the end and I'll cover that one in due course. So counts 1 and 2 relate to wire fraud, and count 1 is conspiracy to commit wire fraud, whereas count 2 is just committing wire fraud. The wording in these sections is pretty dry and reflects the wording in the codification. This piece probably summarises it all. Bankman-Fried agreed with others to defraud customers of FTX.com by misappropriating those customers' deposits and using those deposits to pay expenses and debts of Alameda Research, Bankman-Fried's proprietary crypto hedge fund, and to make investments. And you'll see here the wording in count 2 is pretty much identical. So counts 1 and 2 were about customers, counts 3 and 4 are about lenders. And again we have this conspiracy to commit wire fraud on lenders in count 3, and then the actual committing wire fraud in count 4. In count 3 it's quite specific. It talks about specifically lenders to Alameda and how Bankman-Fried defrauded them by providing misleading information about Alameda Research's financial condition. And count 4 repeats the same arguments, also from 2019. So something to ponder. On count 3, it talks about conspiracy to commit wire fraud on lenders from June 2022, and in count 4 it talks about from at least 2019. So it reads like they're saying Bankman-Fried was on his own up until June 2022 committing fraud, and then it became a conspiracy after that. I think you'll agree with me that things probably go a bit further back if conspiracy is involved. So count 5, slightly different tack. This is a conspiracy to commit commodities fraud. So here they're going to have to get into a bit of technicalities when it comes to the court case, at least in respect of what they mean by this. Let me read the couple of pieces out of this section which will give you the gist of what the allegation is. So Bankman-Fried ... in connection with a swap, a contract of sale of a commodity in interstate commerce and for future delivery on and subject to the rules of a registered entity, a manipulative and deceptive device and contrivance in contravention of ... being untruthful and misleading, effectively acting fraudulently and deceptively. And here Bankman-Fried agreed with others to defraud customers of FTX ... by misappropriating those customers' deposits and using those deposits to pay expenses and debts of Alameda Research. So count 5 was commodities fraud and 6 is securities fraud, and that's conspiracy to commit, of course. So here again we have slightly different dates. It says from at least in or about May 2022 up to November 2022, and it goes on to say that was the period he committed fraud in. And again we have the dry language as we've had in all the other sections from the codification itself, which again I'm going to skip over somewhat. And then we get to the nub of the allegation again, a scheme to defraud investors in FTX.com by providing false and misleading information to these investors regarding FTX.com's financial condition. And in the one little bit of a tangible fact they've put in here, we see that in point 17 caused an email to be sent to an FTX investor in New York, that contained materially false information about FTX's financial condition. Money laundering. So this is again a conspiracy. So to paint this somewhat simply, this refers back to count 2 of this indictment, which is about customer fraud. And so he basically took the customer's money and, having got it, laundered it. Here it talks about the criminally derived property of a value of greater than $10,000. That's probably the statutory threshold for this sort of case, but really we're talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, obviously. Okay, so we've had counts 1 to 7, all about the money. Conspiracy and actual fraud against customers and investors, securities and commodities fraud, and then money laundering the proceeds. There is very, very little in the way of any tangible facts or evidence in this, and I'll give you a couple of thoughts on what I think of this at the end. Now, as I mentioned, count 8 is the odd one out here. Let's read the title: Conspiracy to Defraud the United States and Violate the Campaign Finance Laws. So in case any of you weren't aware, Sam Bankman-Fried was known as being a very high-value donor to the Democrat Party. So how is this violating the law? Let's find out. So again, here we have this dry preamble about what the law is. Obviously, you can read it in your own time. So he's accused here of impairing, obstructing, and defeating the lawful functions of a department and agency of the United States through deceitful and dishonest means. Well, so we can see here the nub of what's going on in 18. It was a further part and object of the conspiracy that Samuel Bankman-Fried, the defendant and others known and unknown, would and did knowingly and willfully make contributions to candidates for federal office, joint fundraising committees and independent expenditure committees in the names of other persons, aggregating to $25,000 and more in a calendar year. So I think what's being said here is he's effectively the donor, but he's using other people to make the donations on his behalf, or putting them in the names of other people to avoid the threshold. And here in 19, it's making the same point, but it's effectively a corporation that's making the donation. So if he were found guilty on these charges, what do the government want? In the case of 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the indictment, they're the frauds and conspiracy to commit fraud against investors and lenders. They want anything back that was derived from the fraudulent transactions. Here it says, any and all property, real and personal, that constitutes or is derived from proceeds traceable to the commission of the said offences. So for count 7, that's the money laundering case. They want all the money that was actually laundered, and whether that was turned into property, real estate, etc. They want it all. Counts 5, 6, and 8, so that's the securities fraud, the commodities fraud, and the violation of the campaign defence laws. There is no direct request for forfeiture. However, I suspect that the actual forfeiture are built into the statutory instrument that affects the codification, so that would be already inherently a part of law anyway. And it ends there. Now, the one glaring omission in all of this, to my mind, is the names of the co-conspirators. Conspiracy runs through quite a lot of this indictment, yet there are no names. I suspect we will see this indictment evolve and develop, and names will be added to it in due course, and they will be the co-conspirators of Sam Bankman-Fried. The second point that confuses me is when they talk about the dates of these frauds being committed. Some, like the commodities fraud, started from 2019, as they allege. Others, like the wire fraud on lenders, they're saying was commenced in June 2022. Somehow, I can't believe these things are independent. I think Sam Bankman-Fried ran the company as he always did, and Alameda for that matter. And so if there was fraud going on, I think it probably started pretty much at the commencement of both FTX and Alameda when Sam Bankman-Fried set them up. Clearly what we're missing here is the source documents that give rise to all of these counts that are being alleged, and we will have a much clearer picture on what exactly these points are being made and what evidence they have to support them when we see the government's arguments laid out more fully. And before I make my last point, if you've liked this video, then please consider subscribing to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you hit the notification bell, then you won't miss out on other videos. So my last point, unlike the Securities Exchange and Commodities Exchange, which are Parts 1 and Part 3 respectively of this series, this indictment is the one that carries jail time. Now, it's a little bit too early to be speculating on any of that, but clearly you're looking at decades in jail for something of this nature, given the size and scale of people affected and the funds involved, obviously. So that's all from me for now. Bye for now.